Subscriber, and welcome to part 2 of the 5 best books that I've read so far in 2024. I'm filming this video quarterly, so this is April, May and June. If you haven't seen the first video already, I have that linked in the cards and down below, but you'll know to expect parts 3 and 4 as we go across the year and we hopefully, fingers crossed, find more favourite books. This time around was a little bit harder. I feel like my first video was like all 5 stars and then 1 4.5. This video we've got a 4, 2 4.5s, and we've also got 2 5 stars. So it wasn't a completely flawless reading quarter, but I'm still really happy with everything I got to, and the books that I loved, I really loved. So I'm excited to talk to you about them all. I've been putting off this video a little bit just because I filmed a video where I ran through every single book I've read this year, so I'm going to try not to repeat myself and come up with new things to say about these books that I'm going to be mentioning. Like the last video, I put these in a bit of a ranked order from my least favourite to my most favourite, but yeah, all of these are really well loved books. So the first book I have to mention is the one book that I don't own physically. That's one I definitely want to get at some point. It's on my wish list actually, but it's Acts of Desperation by Nolan. This was a 4-star read, such an impactful read, and honestly it was teetering on the point of a 4.5. It was almost one of those books that like should have been a 5, but I didn't quite have that feeling. I felt like it went on a little bit, but aside from that, this was such a good read and so unique in its concept and its delivery. It's just really great. In Acts of Desperation, we're following this girl. I think she's an unnamed protagonist. She is in this relationship with this man who's just awful, but she is very kind of dependent on him and he just does what he wants. At one point, he actually breaks up with her and she vows that from that point on, if he decides to come back into her life, she's going to do whatever she can for him and completely discount her own feelings and her own happiness, basically. Very internal, constantly questioning how she's reacting to every single situation, every single little detail within every single situation. Plays with how she reacts, which I found incredibly relatable. Not knowing how to deal with the situation, so therefore, you know, thinking if she's sad about something, she should be obvious about her sadness, but then that having a negative impact on the situation. So then she realizes that maybe she should have ignored her own feelings in order to put herself aside to sustain this relationship, even though the relationship in its core and itself is so not a relationship. It's just a one-sided thing of her absolute adoration for this man who really is just the worst. It's the sort of thing where you're like, just leave him, but at the same time you completely, or I at least completely understood why it felt so impossible for her to leave him. I really felt for her, and several lines of this actually brought tears to my eyes. It was a really well written book, so eloquent in its description of these feelings that feel impossible to describe, and it literally could not have had a more perfect ending. I'm not going to spoil it obviously, but I really didn't want everything to wrap up because I think she was in her 20s and she had so much more of life to live, so I didn't want the end to be an end for her, but I also wanted to have some sort of satisfaction out of having, you know, got through this novel. For it to just not give us any sort of conclusion at all, I would have been quite disappointed. But the way it wrapped up was so kind of accurate for a situation like that, but also so hopeful, and that also brought tears to my eyes. 4-star read, so good. I really highly recommend this, and I can't wait to have my own copy so I can transfer my annotations from my Kindle over to the novel, have them forever, because I really want to kind of revisit this at some point. It's so impactful in my life, particularly in that current moment. Okay, moving on to my 4.5s, I have Crown of Midnight by Maas. This is the second book in the Throne of Glass series. The first book follows Selena. She is an assassin and she is hired by the prince to take place in the competition which is run by the king of the land. A bunch of the kind of thieves and murderers, professional assassins, basically criminals, are coming together to compete to become the king's personal assassin. Selena gets through this competition. I feel like that's not a spoiler because we've got another 7 books in the series. Crown of Midnight is very much about the direct after effects of Throne of Glass. A lot of the relationships that have been kind of loosely or very lightly established throughout Throne of Glass, and Crown of Midnight explores those further and like kind of plays with them and sees where they could possibly go. It also bridges the plot between the first book and the later series, because I feel like the first book almost could have been a standalone. This one kind of like opens up how we're going to be going on this huge journey, not like a physical journey, weaving the tale of this story. I feel like this book kind of sets the ground rules for that. Some people might find it a little bit boring because it's not got a lot of action, a lot of plot. It was like a really essential installment. I didn't get the 5-star feeling, but I literally couldn't fault it on anything. I'm buddy reading this series with Lucy, and she found that the pacing was a little bit difficult in terms of the beginning of the book just being a little bit slower than the end. She much preferred it when the action kind of picked up a little bit, but I personally enjoyed pretty much every single second of this, so 4.5 stars to Crown of Midnight. Such a good world, and I'm just so excited to continue it. So many good quotes, so many good moments. Yeah, just really well written. fantasy. My other 4.5 star across April to June was Despair by Vladimir Nabokov. This is actually a book that I read for a video in which I read Alexander's favourite book, and because of that I won't go into a lot of depth on this. But this book follows Herman. He is this absolutely like delusional man who is prancing around Germany, I think it is. He meets this homeless man who he's absolutely convinced is his doppelganger, his exact like for like, and you see this kind of plan that he hatches, which is basically this kind of like money making plan to better his life. He feels like the world is kind of like a bit unjust to him personally, and nobody really understands his incredible intelligence or his wit and humour and things like that. He's definitely an unreliable narrator. He's an absolute like definition of that. But yeah, this book kind of spirals out of control towards the end, and it's definitely a journey. Nabokov is just a master linguist. I've read a letter by him and I felt the same thing with that, but I feel like this one even more so. Maybe because it was so short, it was able to really just experiment with the language. His writing is just otherworldly. Literally nothing I've ever read has compared to his style. It's so unique. You can feel the amount of fun that he had with this book. It's just him seeing what he can do with language, how much he can kind of like play with the reader. But it also doesn't feel like some huge brain workout. It doesn't feel like you're really stretching to understand what's actually happening or the language or whatever it might be. It felt really easy to read, but also so brilliant and so sharp. It lost the 0.5 just because I felt like the plot wasn't everything to me. I wasn't obsessed with that. There were elements of this book my jaw just dropped, and like how 6-star some of the lines felt. I think the plot was used as a bit of a way to explore what Nabokov could do with his writing and with his storytelling, but I don't think that was like a shining part of the novel. Really highly recommend this. I think it's great, and I think that modern classics are kind of perfect for what I was talking about, that thing of being like a classic book but also one that is so understandable and so easily digestible. Okay, second favourite book of the last 3 months is Serpent of the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I love this book. Obviously it's on this list. In The Serpent of the Wings of Night we follow this girl called, why do I want to say Carissa? Okay, Araya. Araya is a human, but she lives in this world which is made up of humans and vampires. Vampires definitely rule. Humans are their prey, their predators. When her village and her people are destroyed, she's actually adopted by the king of the Nightborn vampire clan. So she has this weird kind of sense of safety just because of how powerful he is. He wouldn't let anything happen to her at all. But at the same time, she's surrounded by people who are, you know, she's prey amongst predators. So she is very, very vulnerable, and she feels very unsafe in her current like living situation and her lifestyle. And she also doesn't understand what her future might look like because her adoptive father really actually truly loves her, but she obviously has a mortal lifespan, and vampires, you know, live for many more years than that, and she can obviously never like rise to the position of her father in his footsteps because she is a human. And if anything happened to her father, she would be incredibly, I mean, she'd just be dead basically. He's the one person kind of protecting her within this world. So what happens is Araya enters this competition called the Gajari, which is basically this Hunger Games-esque sequence of trials. The vampires have to fight each other, but mostly other things, teaming up together in order to become the victor and in turn win a wish from the goddess Nyaxia, I think her name is. And the wish that Araya wants to win from her is to become a vampire. Classic humans want to be vampires. It gives Twilight, but I absolutely loved seeing vampires written in a way that wasn't Twilight. I love Twilight. I mean, I was a perfect age for it when it came out, and it just was a kind of cornerstone within my teenage years. But I also acknowledge how cringe it is. This book managed to do the whole vampire thing without the cringe, which was really incredible, because I feel like vampires are so camp and so like almost ridiculous just because of what we've seen within pop culture. So this book kind of like switched the narrative for them, which I really enjoyed. It's also a book that has incredibly layered world building. It's so well written, so well constructed. You can see that Carissa Broadbent really went into making this world, creating it. I got so attached to the characters. The pacing was perfect. This book is like 450 pages, which is actually quite short for the first book in like a big fantasy world. It's the first book in the duology, and I feel like I would expect this to be like 500 or more. And I feel like losing those 50 pages was what kept this book really like alive. I think my attachment to the characters goes hand in hand with the pacing being perfect. I feel like nothing was wasted, no word, no phrase, no page. There are some really complex dynamics between people. The love between Araya and her father, Vincent, is incredible. It's so beautiful to see, and it's not something that's just told to you. It's definitely something that you see by build up throughout the book, and the end of the book is so impactful. There are so many plot twists, truly like the most insane ending that I think I've ever read in any book ever. Also absolutely had me sobbing, so yeah, it was just all over the place. I felt all the emotions in the final pages, and I just loved literally all of this. I can't fault this book. The ending was literally insane, the atmosphere is perfect, the world is fascinating. It's only like the first book in 2-book series, which is incredible as well. I've actually found out this is the Nightborn duet. That's what the name of the series is, but it's actually part of a bigger series of different duologies called The Crowns of Nyaxia. Book 2 is already out in this one. Book 1 in the next duology is coming very, very soon. I think in September or October, something like that. Get your hands on this, give it a go if you haven't already, if you love fantasy. This also has like a pretty substantial romance subplot. It doesn't take away from the plot at all, or the like friendships or anything like that. Really highly recommend this. And then my number one favourite book of the second quarter of 2024, though it does come in pretty close with Serpent, Wings and Nights, is Heir by Sarah J. Maas. I would say this is my number one favourite book of the entire year, including the first quarter as well. I'm surprised this year, looking back on my reading, how many of my 5-star rates have been fantasy. I love fantasy. Fantasy was the genre of books that I really got into when I was like 17, 18, you know, really like diving into reading. But I've definitely kind of steered away from it, particularly because I left kind of YA behind. And I definitely feel like the genre that really impresses me is literary fiction. I just find romance fun, but it's very hard for me to find a romance 5-star. And I definitely fell out of love with fantasy when I drifted towards literary fiction. That was around the kind of like COVID years, and that was because I was depressed basically. That involved a very big book slump. I found that getting back into reading, it was easier to approach that by switching up the genre and like finding something new within it. I'm slowly finding my way back to fantasy, and I think that's so special. I've really enjoyed 2024, particularly for that aspect. Aside from that, Heir, okay, let's talk about the third book in Throne of our series. I really feel a little bit guilty about mentioning Crown of Midnight and Heir, but they're both just such elite reads, and I didn't want to replace any of them for a 4-star or anything like that, so I'm going to be mentioning this again. Also a very, very different book from Crown of Midnight. Again, it's hard to talk about this because of the fact that it's the third book in a series, but we're in a new location, we're with new characters, we're exploring so much more of the world, so much more of the magic system. Selena, our main character, really goes back to her roots. We see her kind of explore her past. There's obviously a little bit of that in The Assassin's Blade, that series of like novellas, but this one is like more of like her home and who she is, not just what she's been through. This was the 5 stars more for the feeling I got while reading it than the actual like technical elements of the novel. I felt so comfortable and so happy and so like peaceful while reading this book. Every single night I just would open this book to do my before bed reading. I would just instantly settle into it, and it just felt so comforting, which is funny actually because the beginning of this book, Selena's dealing very heavily with depression and a lot of kind of PTSD, particularly from the end of Crown of Midnight, but also from things in the past that she's having to begin to face full on. I found her struggle comforting, partly I guess because I related to some of it, but also because of the way that Sarah J. Maas wrote it. She wrote it with so much care and so much consideration. Again, this ending of this book is kind of crazy. I've found no problem with the pacing at all. I think I didn't find that problem because I was just enjoying the book so much as it was naturally unfolding. But I know that some people might feel like the first half of this is a little slow. But yeah, the ending really picks up. There are so many crazy moments, so many moments of shock, and I found myself so connected to our main characters. I felt as if there were people that I not only knew, people that I loved, just like in and out of tears and all over the place. Like emotions were running high throughout this book, but I just have so much overwhelming love for everybody involved. Almost everybody. Obviously the people who are causing the problems, I just kind of happily trundled along with this book, and it just brought me so much like contentedness. It was a really unique reading experience, and I think that's partially why it's like a 6-star read. A favourite book of all time, I'm thinking. So there you have it. 5 books, obviously these 4 plus Acts of Desperation, that I have truly loved in the past 3 months. Every single one of them, for different reasons, have been so special. Great kind of companions across the year. I'm sure that most of these, if not all of them, will make it into my top 10 books of 2024. Hopefully I'm going to have a lot of good reads over the next few months as well though. Maybe these might even get pushed out. That would be crazy though. I really doubt. Definitely Serpent, Wings and Nights and Heir. I wanted to show you my tabs. Every single one of these books is so tabbed, and I can't wait to have Acts of Desperation and to do the same with that. I love them all, highly recommend them all, like I've been saying. Just such a good reading year. I feel like I'm famous for not having very many 5 stars. 2022 I had 2. Last year I think I had like, what, 5 or even fewer. This year I've had so many. I think I'm like nearing like the 10 mark. It's just so incredible to be reading books that I'm loving. I feel like I'm really finding what I personally love, like what my style of book is and what really makes me kind of like tick in terms of like rating something highly. But yeah, that takes time. Don't worry if you're not there yet, because it's very easy, A, to give everything a 5-star, and then B, when you're going to change that, reassess how like liberal you are with your 5 stars to then be finding that you're giving none. It just takes time to like establish how you feel and like what your rating system, everything like that is. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know that you did. Subscribe if you'd like to stick around and see what other books I get to throughout 2024. Sending my love to you from here to wherever you may be in the world. I hope you're having a wonderful July. Tomorrow is my birthday actually. It's filming a vlog this week. A birthday vlog, like a reading vlog, but also just showing you what birthday activities I get up to. Without further ado, I'll leave you in peace because I'm sure this has been a pretty lengthy video, and I'll see you very, very soon for another one in a couple of days. Bye bye.